Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I mean, the music was coming up, but we did not wait. But that's okay. That's okay. Some other time. Well, thank you so much for joining us in this today's session. We usually have these sessions every month. For those of you that join us for the first time, we have these sessions every Thursday of the month to enlighten our community on angel investing, founders, anything tech really. We're here for you. So if you have any questions, you can just use the Slack channel to ask any of your questions. So what to expect in this session, we will just be doing a brief intro of HoaQ, again, for those of you that joined us for the first time, then sharing just a bit about what we do at HoaQ, and then I'll pass it on to my colleague Newbie to start the conversation with Nicole and share with you some of the HoaQ updates, and then we close. So for those of you who don't know us, HoaQ Club is a community of creators and operators backing entrepreneurs, building scalable businesses for Africa and its diaspora. Our mission at HoaQ is to support founders who are leveraging technology to build economic infrastructure for Africa and Africans. And we started HoaQ in 2020, and since then we've been able to deploy over $3 million and invested in about over 90 companies. We also like to assist these companies with whatever they might need along the line, and also ensuring that our investors get return on investments, because that's why you're here, but also to back Africa and its diaspora. So that being said, if you want to learn more about HoaQ, you can go to our website hoaq.co, and we have everything there. So now we're passing it on to my colleague Newbie to introduce our guest speaker for today, Nicole, and also to carry on the conversation.
Thank you so much, Falake. I always look forward to this session because one of our themes, and Joe would, if I gave $1 for every time I use this word, I think Joe will have been a millionaire by now. Joe, do you want to guess the word?
It's either enablement or education.
It is
or
enablement.
Both.
Yeah, it is enablement. I think for us, like we want people to be part of HoaQ, back companies and everything, but for us, like, you shouldn't remain the same. There should be a sense of enablement, like on your journey, just to be a better investor, a better operator, and if you want to actually be a founder as well, just to be a better founder. So that enablement is very key for us. And this forum, I think, is one way we do that, by getting people to come just share with us from their experience, their knowledge, and where they see it and stuff. So thanks so much, Nicole, for taking the time to come chat with us today. I guess we could just start with introductions. Who is Nicole doing? I think first of all, how do you pronounce your last name? Because I've heard different variations of it. So how do you pronounce your last name? And then just tell us about yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Newbie. It's pronounced Dunn. So you can imagine growing up was interesting because every time someone says, "Oh, I'm Dunn," everyone laughs. So yeah, I still get some of those jokes today. But it's great to be here. Really humbled to see some familiar names who've dialed in, but also some people I haven't met yet to participate in this conversation. I hope we can have just a great engaging dialogue. And so please jump in with questions. Newbie's got some good ones that he's going to grill me on. A bit about myself. I've always been really passionate about the potential of entrepreneurship to drive really sustainable change and impact in Africa. And it's amazing to see more and more communities like this emerging to really enable, empower, educate entrepreneurs and founders and investors on the continent, because it really does take an ecosystem. I got the privilege early on in university to work on some projects in the entrepreneurial space. One was coaching micro entrepreneurs in the South African informal economy, helping them to bring more sustainable business practices into their companies, as well as help them pitch for corporate deals. We have an enterprise development system in South Africa that incentivizes corporates to work with smaller businesses. And that was one of the first ways I got to know the ecosystem. And also then got an amazing opportunity to work in an accelerator with the Dutch consulate in South Africa, which looked at pairing scale-ups from the Netherlands and South Africa to create trade corridors in both those markets. But ultimately, I realized I wasn't that valuable as a 18, 19-year-old with limited skill set, no network, pretty limited credibility. And so as much as I wanted to make this change, I felt like I needed to go out and get skills, network, credibility as quickly as possible. And at the time, the best way I could think to do that was to become a consultant, because I'd always been a little bit rebellious, I suppose. So model student, but didn't like following the rules, found it hard to accept arbitrary authority. And now I know that's because I'm an entrepreneur, but at the time I thought it was just difficult.
You're not diagnosed yet.
Yeah. I'd not yet been diagnosed, so I was still figuring myself out a bit. But yeah, I found a consultancy in the UK that really resonated with a lot of my values. You know, they spoke about building businesses, not PowerPoints, hiring entrepreneurs, not employees. And I thought that was a great way to get exposure to many different businesses and many different functions really quickly, skip the corporate ladder and go straight to the boardroom. And so I did that and had an amazing opportunity to build out new business units within that consultancy, help them really build out their client base and capability set in Africa. At the same time, the firm was growing really quickly. So we actually listed on the London Stock Exchange while I was there. So got to see an IPO process, which is hugely privileged in the context of Africa, where, you know, we haven't been able to see that many of those just yet. And after that, moved into the corporate development team to head up commercial due diligence for the acquisitions they were doing as a group, which was a great learning curve, but a terrible role for me because I love people. I love being out in the field, problem solving with customers. And now I had to sit in this war room where I couldn't talk to anyone about what I was doing because it would have been risk of insider trading. And so I ended up leaving and joining Founders Factory Africa. And I can see some ex-colleagues, Ayo and Stephen, on the call today, which is great. Had an amazing year there, but ultimately decided I wanted to be closer to the action, which is why we're having this conversation today.
Yep. So, I mean, thanks for that background. I think one thing that if I was to see you, at least one chance we can all say is like one of us, you want an investor with many hats. But then you decided to cross the road. You decided to get a piece of the action. And I think you alluded to it earlier. There are some attributes and characters in yourself that is now validating such a move. But just talk to us about our transition as much as you can disclose. You were here sitting in Founders Factory, helping startups accelerate their journeys. When I engaged with you at first with my paystack hat, it was really about trying to establish a relationship with Founders Factory and really partner to support startups. And a month later, here you were CEO of Review. Like, so what inspired that shift? And I know it's likely going to be one thing, but like, just what combination of ingredients and the timing and features or things that you saw writing on the wall that said, okay, now is the time to make this jump from being a VC to an operator?
Yeah, as you say, there wasn't one big aha moment. I joined Founders Factory to really learn how to build and scale businesses on the continent. And the more I was there, the more I realized that's not something you can learn from the sidelines. You can get a lot of insight into where founders struggle. You can get insight into how investors evaluate businesses and where founders maybe don't understand or can't bring themselves up from the detail to gain perspective. But the analogy I've used is swimming, right? You can study it from the outside, but at the end of the day, you have to get in the water. And that was more and more true for me the more and more I worked with founders. And that became increasingly a part of my restlessness and wanting to join a company and really build something. The other thing was actually imposter syndrome. So, you know, imposter syndrome gets a lot of bad rap, I guess, and it is a struggle, particularly with women. But I think every now and again, it's a really good emotional indicator for an area where you can grow or an area where you feel you need to develop. And for me, that was very true. So I was sitting in front of founders and kind of had this profound realization that I'd spent my whole career advising people on something I'd never done. And it became more and more of a prominent thought for me that, is what I'm saying actually correct? Like, am I able to really empathize with this person in front of me? Do I understand the constraints on their decision-making right now? And again, the only way that I could know the answers to those questions was to go and do it myself. So those two things combined really pushed me to start to look for opportunities to join an early stage company or become a co-founder in an early stage company. And why Revio is more serendipitous. I happened to meet them at a very early stage in their journey. They'd reached out to me, similar to you actually, Nubi, to say, is there something we can structure with Founders Factory, use your portfolio as early beta customers? And I said, don't know why you're targeting startups. Your business model's completely screwed up. They got a whole lot more than they were asking for, I guess. And so 3 days after that conversation, Ruan, the co-founder and CEO, phoned me back and said, do you want to come build this thing with me? And I didn't actually say yes. It took me about 4 months to say yes. So I worked as a part-time advisor to figure out if this was something I thought I could add value to, but ultimately, decided it was something I was excited about and came on board.
Interesting. So are you saying there could have there's an alternative universe where you would have been working at Paystack? Is that what you're saying?
Quite possibly. I mean, you've got Amandine, so I think you're pretty sorted on the female COO front. But maybe in another lifetime.
Yeah, it's very easy to like learn that it wasn't a step change per se. It was more of a transition. Like, okay, let's try this out. I'll consult, and then I would see how things go, and then I want to be more hands-on, and then I want to join the team, because I think that's what many people might find daunting. Like, oh, I'm going to make this drastic change. I think something even I think Avada Madin recount the story. And she, by the way, she's a COO of a Paystack, where she was at IFC as well, investing in startups. And I was like, geez, I'm just telling these people what to do, what I've not done myself. And there she was. And then now started to advise and consult, and then she didn't even know she was being interviewed for a job, and then like months and months later she eventually like set into the role, and she didn't even start as CEO. She had like biz dev, and then biz dev became head of business, and then eventually pretty much got the title of what she had been doing for many years. So I think that transition really, like, just being open to just trying new things in tiny doses and seeing how this feels on you and all, I think this is very important. Let's go by just I mean, still then you come in with a different heart, and so you were looking at business model, financial models, market size, and all this kind of stuff to say, okay, is it a viable idea to invest in? But now you're thinking go to market, selling talent, press, fundraising. So like, what were the biggest kind of like challenges you faced in trying to again like pretty much like put on this new skin, if you will?
Yeah, I think as an investor, your primary responsibility or job is to ask really good questions. And then as a founder, you have to go and find the answers. And I think making that shift is really interesting, right? Because as you say, there's not one right answer. The questions are pretty consistent that investors are asking. And so I think appreciating how much goes into answering any of those questions and actually getting something live, demonstrating that traction. I mean, I think back to meetings that I would have with founders, and, Bongani would ask, like, why didn't this metric move? And I would kind of see the founder get a bit uncomfortable. And I was like, does he not know the answer? And now I know the answer is there are 200 reasons that metric didn't move this month. Which one would you like me to tell you, right? So I think you don't really empathize until you've seen it on the other side. So as much as it's cliche, like, I really think it's that empathy for really understanding how much you are juggling at the same time as an operator. The emotional strain, the highs and lows, as on an operator side, the highs are so high, the lows are so low, and those can happen within hours or even minutes of each other. And so trying to instill that discipline of, it's never as good as you think, but it's also never as bad as you think, to kind of keep your temperament and your energy through what is a really intense journey. I think that's been one of the most surprising and interesting experiences of coming to the other side.
Yeah, I mean that said, like, I think one could say you brought along some superpowers, and so I don't know how much of an influence, because again you joined and But a little while later, yeah, you're announcing your seed round, a 5.2 million seed round from QED and Partech, very heavyweight investors in their own right. And I'm just curious, like again, like did you was that a factor? Did you were able to bring in your superpowers of again having sat on the other side of the table to just better guide as the startup as an operator to go about fundraising? Did that work out that way?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been running fundraising, which is non-traditional for a COO, but as you say, coming from a VC background, it definitely made a huge difference. One is that I had existing relationships, right? So the first conversation I'm having with Partech is not, hey, I need money. It's I've established this relationship and trust over a long period of time. But the second is really understanding how VCs think and evaluate businesses. And that put me in a great position to lead in those conversations, because I think founders don't always understand the question behind the question that's being asked. And if you can really understand the risk or the doubt that person has, it can really help you to get a better outcome in those conversations. I think also understanding the process is really helpful, because that's what a lot of founders don't have insight into. So a really tactical example is in our fundraise now, I wrote a deal memo for Revio and put it in our data room exactly how I would have written a deal memo in Founders Factory. And so an analyst can go copy paste and put it into their own deal memo as it goes up to the partner. And so we can have a much more engaging conversation around like how we thinking about the business, what's the potential, and we're not stuck on, what's the go-to-market, which customers do you serve, that's all out and ready to consume.
I mean, it's like speaking the same language as well. It's like,
yeah, exactly.
Like knowing your audience and tailoring what, like again, it's like you said, if I'm going to save this analyst like an hour of time trying to translate my deck to a memo before the project even begins, let's just skip to the good part already. And,
exactly.
I think that's definitely one way that one advantage as well that comes from that. I'm just curious. I'm curious though. So I mean, we have a room of angel investors, and I think when we started like HoaQ as well, one of the, again, keyword enablement, one way we thought enablement to play out will be angel investors who've backed early stage startups. These startups eventually like grow and scale. I want to make sure I'm still okay. They grow and scale and need talent, and so this angel developer say, okay, do you know what? Like, I run finance at this in this big consulting firm, like KPMG, EY, or I do audits here, or I'm a senior engineer here, and then I was actually like transition to actually be a member of this team or this startup, and so I'm thinking, again, my question for you will be, making that shift, how should angel investors right now, or how should angel be thinking about conversations or engagement they have with founders that could just be the reason why they crossed the road? Because you were speaking to Revio, it was again more advice. First that come to partner with manufacturer, and then you were consulting with them and all. Like, was there any intentionality to like, this could be my next move, or how were you able to like qualify to say, this could be it, let me go for it? Because I'm very sure you spoke to more than hundreds of startups, and it became Revio. So why wasn't it the others? What did you see in the Revio engagement that made it a viable next step for you?
Yeah, it's interesting because when I announced that I was leaving, a whole bunch of startups in the portfolio were like, why didn't you tell us you were in the market? And I was like, well, you didn't ask, So I think if you are working with, I don't know if there's founders on this call, but if you are working with an angel investor that you really like and think could add value, initiate that conversation, because I think it's quite hard to do from the other side. So I'm trying to imagine how I would have gone about it if I'd actually opened up that opportunity. But I guess for me, it was like, is this a business and problem that I'm interested in spending the next 5 to 7 years solving, right? And that was probably the most profound question I had to get comfortable with, because I'd up until then, always optimized in my career for options and total surface area, right? Choose the broadest degree, choose consulting, because then I don't have to pin myself down, choose VC so I can work for multiple businesses. And now I was picking one. And so it was like, could I realistically see myself spending the next 5 to 7 years trying to solve this problem? And so I spent a lot of time trying to understand the market, trying to understand what was already there. And one of the things I shared on LinkedIn when I did make the move was how I'd written a deal memo essentially for the company itself. I think the other thing, which you kind of alluded to there about, finance manager at Deloitte, is what early stage teams really need is someone who can come in and add value quite quickly and pick up things and own. And so a big screening criteria for me is, in this existing leadership team, do I have a unique skill set that's very complementary to the people who are already there? And that was very obvious to me in Revio. Like Ron is brilliant on the product and technical side, but not so brilliant on the commercial and fundraising side, right? It's not his comfort zone. It's not a world that he knows or comes from. And so immediately I could come in and be like, hey, give me the fundraise, give me the go-to-market, and I'll run with that. And so, yeah, I think that's the two kind of big sense checks that I would do when you're thinking about which company would I potentially go and work with.
Yeah, and now that you're in it, you're in it as well. Like, I'm just curious, like, are there any things that you're like, oh, I did not consider that, or maybe I didn't think too hard about this, and if I given a second chance, I'll be perhaps gone a little bit deeper on this or that. Any surprises, anything to caught you off guard regarding the transition?
Yeah, I mean, I think like most businesses, all the numbers were very carefully selected, and like, I probably didn't dive deep enough into like what is actually built today, guys. So I thought I was joining a little bit of a later stage company, but it was right at the beginning, which in some ways has been good. I've gotten more of a 0 to 1 experience than I was expecting. But I think that will always be the case. I think coming from the investment side, you always get the board pack version, right? You never get the behind the scenes. So I think that will always be surprising. I think the one thing I did well was I spent a lot of time with the team to check culture fit. Also for me as a woman at the time, it was an all-male team. I wanted to really be sure that I was going to be taken seriously as an equal partner, as an equal founder. And that was one of the reasons it took me so long to say yes. I really wanted to be sure about that. So I think if you can get that right, like these are people I want to work with, this is a problem I want to work from, and there's something I can bring to the table today, it's worth having a shot at it.
Yeah, that's a good one. I think you're spot on. Like, every startup wants to be. We'll show you the gliding duck and not the, not the part where it's turning underwater. I mean, same thing from Stripe to Paystack. Yeah, things are way more different on the outside and the inside. But I think the good thing is that they put in the work to present the outside, so you're doing something right as well. And big one on again spending time. I want to double click on the culture piece as well, because like you're right, it's not always about the idea, the opportunity. It's also like, who are you building this with, and again, is there a good fit there? And so you mentioned you spent time with them, and all. I'm just curious, like, what kind of Rubik cube do you have? Or what kind of, like, what were you measuring for? How long was enough to say, okay, I think this is it, as well? As you know, you can never know everything about a person. The longer you spend with people, the more you learn. So just any kind of like metric or guide rails to tour out, or just again evaluate culture fit. Just curious to hear more about that.
Yeah, I think I was pretty direct with the team about what my concerns were and what good looked like for me. And to their credit, they very quickly like tried to open up as much as possible. So I spent time with them both professionally, but then also personally. We would have breakfasts or dinners, or like Ruan even invited me to his home to meet his wife and his daughter. And, I think really tried to show me why he's doing this and, why he thought I would be a good partner to come and do it with him. A lot's going to change as a business grows, but your core values are one of the things that can stay the same. So really trying to understand from someone how they think about business, what their own version of integrity looks like, what do they really value. Honestly, what are they trying to get out of it as well? Is this a get rich quick kind of adventure, or is it about building legacy, something bigger? What's really driving them to do that? That was really important for me to understand. How do they handle like a disagreement with you or conflict? So trying to have intentionally quite contentious conversations and seeing, well, how do they show up? How do they respond to you when you make them a bit uncomfortable, right? So those were some of the things I was testing. So yeah, I think Ron aged a bit in that process. But I put him through quite a lot to get to the point where I was like, okay, I'll come do this with you.
Awesome.
But it's important, right? Because it's as intense, if not more, than a marriage in some ways. So that's some of how I thought about it.
That's very, very interesting. Like, I mean, pretty much like you're simulating chaos and let's say tension to see how people will react, because like and I think again, when you have little time to make a decision as well. I mean, you couldn't sit on this for forever, and so it's like, how do I fast track all the things that will likely happen on this, again, like say 5 to 7 year journey. So might as well like just like play it all out as quickly as possible. So that's quite interesting. I like the going beyond the dimension of work to see, okay, in what other spaces can I get to learn about this person and their why, what drives them. I'm not saying anything's wrong with anybody building to get rich, as long as you're aligned as well on the and be on the same wavelength as well, then that's all well and good. But you don't want to be like conflicting on that. So I want to like build this and sell it, like pump it and just drop it, versus like legacy and stuff. So I think it's really about getting alignment. So that's quite interesting. Now again, back to just angel investors who are also thinking of making this jump. What advice would you give? And just like I think we've answered in bits in those and drips and all, but I'm just curious, like if there were just a handful of things, 1 to 3 things that you would advise or just consider this, and it can be very practical to like, are you ready to not earn a salary? So, like, are you ready to live off your savings for a while? Like, so like just again, holistically, like what like some kind of like pivotal like this question you ask yourself, maybe even after all the data. Now you've spoken to Ron, you spent time with him, you're saying, okay, I feel I want to do this, but then let's just make sure XYZ is good, and then we can make that. What would those things be?
Yeah, sure. I think that's probably different for different people, with different circumstances. So I was in the position where I could take a pay cut, but what was important to me was then I had a meaningful stake in the business, both so that I was taken seriously as a decision maker and co-founder, but also to compensate then for the short-term kind of cut I'd taken on my earning potential. I was up for a promotion at Founders Factory, so I had to kind of let that go and do the math as to what this experiment, I suppose, was worth to me. As I say, I think really understanding and trying to dig into both your curiosity and your strengths, because it's a really hard journey. So if there's not something that you're curious about learning more about, that's going to be really hard. And if there's not something you can fall back on to be like, this is the one thing I'm doing really well and that I bring value on today, because you get pulled in so many different directions, right? I've had to do things that I know I'm not particularly good at. And as someone who's like typically been a high performer in my previous roles, that's been really difficult to get comfortable with. So having those two almost crutches that you can lean on, I think is really important for the resilience that's required through the journey. And then I think coming in eyes wide open, trying to gather as much of that information as possible, but then being really comfortable with the fact that you're going to have to unlearn a lot. There's a lot you think you will know coming in. You will think there is a right way to do certain things. And while you can guide, in some cases, on best practice, there's a lot that you need to be humble about. And so I think that's probably one of the most important things to get right before taking the jump or crossing the road, as you've called it,
Yeah.
for you and for the team around you. Otherwise, it's
Sure.
going to be a disaster.
Awesome. That's very good. That's very good. You mentioned at the start of the call, and we're the halfway mark. So if folks have questions, you could either use the chat feature, or just put your hands up, and then I'll reach out to call you. At the start of the call, you talk about empathy, and how crossing the road from investor to operator has made you more empathetic towards founders, and has given you just a bit more deeper understanding as to like why they do certain things or will react in certain ways. But speaking to, again, people in the room who are mostly angel investors and some operators as well, but just from an angel investor lens, what advice would you give, or if you were to teach us like, how I call it now, like founder manners, so that we're better mannered and when we engaging with founders in the future going forward, what are the things you would just perhaps advise in ways we act, or in things we say, or in our outlook, such that it's constructive and not destructive in that engagement, such that we're more empathetic? Because again, I mean, perhaps we're not in the operator shoes fully as such, so we have some kind of like, I don't know, maybe it's maybe the word is escapes me now, but privilege. But how do we take on that empathy kind of like a lens as we engage? Are they like guiding perhaps questions, or are they guiding like frameworks, or ways in which we can position ourselves to bring that along? So for example, like example that you gave us, to like, I asked the question, why didn't this go up to the left? What would have been a better way to have that question, or followed on when we get a kind of reaction from the founder?
Yeah, again, great question. And I'm sure it's very different for different people. If I now think of myself where I'm sitting and what I've really appreciated about the relationships with angel investors that I've had is, one, they are like, the really good ones are really good at reading, is there something valuable I'm bringing to this relationship right now? So what does this person or this business need right now? And am I the person to bring that? Or am I just creating another relationship for them to manage, which right now is actually more of a burden, right? And I think the best angel investors are able to say, okay, it's time for me to pull back. This founder will come to me when they need to, and it's time for me to lean in because I have something that is uniquely valuable in this moment right now. And I think if you can try to build up that as a skill, that will make you incredibly valuable to any founder that you work with. Maybe a bit cheesy, but try to find something to say that they're doing a good job on something. No one ever tells a founder or an operator they're doing a good job, right? It's just your clients want more, your team wants more, your partner at home wants more, your investors want more. So find a way to just say, you've done a really great job here, and then get into the other stuff, right? Because I think that as well can just set the context for a much better conversation. And having the empathy that the risk is so skewed for, different people. So with an investor, the downside is maybe the money you've invested, and often you've got some kind of protection on that, and the upside is unlimited. For founders, the downside risk is so extreme. I remember at Founders Factory, I had a founder who lost their home in the process of building the business. And so appreciating the scarcity mindset that sometimes founders are in, and what might seem obvious to you from the outside, you need to approach with a level of like gentleness, I suppose, because sometimes it's very hard to think straight when you're under that kind of level of pressure. So yeah, those are some of the things I would think about.
Yeah, that's very good. It's a very, very valid point that you mentioned. I think just knowing when to engage and when to get out of the way, because like you said, like you might seem it as helpful, but you're becoming a burden, another to-do list, another task for the founder, where there is no value in return as such. And so just knowing when to like evaluate an opportunity, and it's more of like, okay, not now, not here, and then it's just knowing where to step out of the way. I think I was speaking to was it Maker Shonye used to be at Stripe, but now with First Round Capital. And it was like someone saying, doing the little things, like you said, that will just pick that person up. So like just what? So you get an investor update, for example, and you don't just go bashing. Why is the bond so high? Why is this? What's going on here? And then it's like, well, so I set you these updates, and now I'm panicking to hear back from you.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
so like it's where you can start with like, okay, what are the positives I'm seeing here? And I think it takes a lot of intentionality to do that. In
Yeah.
giving feedback as well. Just like, okay, what is positive here? I mean, just getting the update in the first place. I think that's a big
Right.
process. I mean, you can tell by the number of portfolio companies we have, even at HoaQ, like how many percent don't send updates. So someone even choosing to send an update, like, fair play. Thanks so much for these updates. It was helpful to know what's going on, and here's how I can help, blah blah blah. And also, I think again, really really being helpful and not adding more burden. But I think like what you said again, like we are seeing just an element of that person's life. Like you don't know what is at stake for this person, what they've done to want to build this company. I think founders are very wired differently as well. The level of what they've put on the line for what they're building as well. Like we're putting we're putting capital and all, but these guys are. If I've always said that if I become world president for one day, the only holiday I would institute is a hug a founder day, where you just go hug founders and show them some love. It's really a hard and crazy thing to do. But yeah, I think those are really really good points that you mentioned. Again, I'm going to just pause quickly for any questions. Again, if you have any live questions, you could put your hand up or use the chat, and then we'll come to that. But just curious, like, what's a day in life of Nicole Dunn, as the VC at Founders Factory, and then transition into, say, an operator at Revio?
Yeah, I mean, I think in some ways being a VC was my dream job. I basically got paid to network, to have interesting conversations, to think about interesting problems and opportunities in the market. And there are some days where I'm sitting in this chaos and I'm like, oh, why did I leave that? That was such a good life. VCs have their stress, so I don't want to knock them. But yeah, like
I was going to say that's not what Hayobabi tells you when Hayobabi paints a very dreadful picture when
yeah, no,
So
you've got
like-
your own targets. You've got to stand in front of your peers. You have fiduciary responsibility. Yeah, I'll sorry, I'll. Every job, I think, is like a little bit like a hangover, right? Like it happens right afterwards. You're like, oh, I'm never drinking again. And then 3 days later, you're like, oh, it wasn't so bad. It was kind of fun.
I know, right?
Yeah, I've probably got a bit of that. I think what is really different being on the operator side, like every day is so different, it's so unpredictable, and the context switching is so extreme. So I can go from a conversation around which market are we going to go into next, or like making quite fundamental decisions about the product strategy or which kind of enterprise or market segment we're going to serve, and then someone will be like, how are we going to track leave? And I'm like, like it's a completely different part of my brain, and I don't care how we track leave, just make sure people take some time off, but there's just so much context switching all the time. And I think that's been most profound in how to manage that. And then also like being in a leadership position in a startup context is interesting, because it's really hard to manage your time, because you still have to be an individual contributor. So you've still got to find time to be, a maker. But your time is often structured like a manager. And so I'm at the moment trying to experiment with things like time blocking or theme days, because too many people have a link to my calendar now. And I just get hit with these, 15, 30-minute slots. So that's been really tough to manage as well. So if anyone has good advice on that, please let me know. But yeah, I think the extremity of the different kinds of decisions that you're making at rapid pace the whole day is the most, like, what stands out.
Yeah. I think for me, definitely I tried the team days as well, like Tuesdays and Tuesdays and Thursdays are meeting days. Wednesday, no meetings, a lot of focus time. I mean, I think it's more of it like it works 70% of the time, and then remaining 30 you're at the mercy of, yeah. But yeah, I think it also helps. I mean, I'm based in Dubai, so time zone wise, I'm very lucky. I can get up early, and nobody's awake yet in most of the markets that we're in, and I can do like focus time 3 hours before Slack starts to get busy. So I think just again, time zone hacking is one way as well to go about it. But yeah, any other recommendations? Please feel free to put in the chat as well. But that's it. I'm just curious, like, what would you now that you're an operator, during your time as VC, were there any things that you think you would have done differently? Perhaps skill you acquired, things that you just muscles that you might just have tried to build. I mean, of course, you don't know the future. There's no crystal ball to know. But were they like even transferable, like say skills as well, or things that or areas that you just thought like, oh no, there were no clear opportunities, and given a chance again, that might have just you have done anything differently.
Yeah, it's always so hard to say because, I think everything would have been different if I had to go back to it now. And I do see myself going back onto the investment side at some point. My whole framework for how I look at and evaluate companies would be different. The way I would support the grace I would give around things like an invest update or metrics or things like that, I think would be much, much bigger, more emphasized. And as I say, that discretion around what is going to move the needle for this company in this moment, I would cut the rest of it. I would go, no design support, none of this, don't talk to investors now, just do this thing. This is the thing you need to get right in the next months, 3 months, 6 months. And I really believe that focus is something I would have done a lot better. Now being on the investor side is helping founders to get that right.
So people like needle eye, like focus on what moves the needle. So it's really like, yeah, you could do 5 things, but like let's get you focused on this one thing. That's really good. And I think you kind of like touched on my next question around like, because I'm just curious as to like your take on how you envision that VC operator dynamic and transition, and it goes both ways. But people say, like you said, people will become better investors once they have operator experience as well. And so like, just how do you envision this playing out? Like, or how would you paint? What would you like to see for that kind of like dynamic between VC and operators going forward in the future?
Yeah, I think something that's been sorely missing in the African ecosystem is almost this generational wisdom of founders. And so it's really great to see, people like E who've been there on the operator side, now going into investing and really being able to relate to the founders he's working with. And I hope we see more founders having success and going back in as early stage investors, whether as an angel or part of an institution. I think we should, encourage more investors to go the operator route as well, even if that is, almost a chapter in the bigger story of ending back up in investing. I do think it makes you a better investor in some ways, especially on the portfolio value creation side. So if that's a big part of what you enjoy, I think it is worth spending some time as an operator. And, there's work you can do on the periphery when you're in a fund, like doing, some product management courses or growth courses. So you've got that like one skill or area of expertise, but I think you have to apply it in a real world use case for it to really mature and to be useful to a startup. So I'm really hopeful we see more of this transitioning in and out from one side to another, because I think the value compounds.
I mean, it's not unheard of to see people like investors become founders. You've got to be a co-founder, and this is just putting you on the spot. Do you think you would ever go start something of your own, like just so instead of going back to the like picking up the VC ads, actually go say, okay, you know what, I'm going to go found my own startup? Is that in any way in your peripheral?
It might be. I think one of the great things about spending time in another role first is that you don't kind of sit there going, okay, I want to start my own thing. Let me go look for a problem. You've noticed problems, right? You kind of get curious around why certain things are so hard. And there's a couple of interesting problems, I've seen where I see a lot of businesses building the same thing as an example. And it's like, well, that should just be a platform business that everyone uses. So yeah, maybe in time, I don't know if I would be as good as the, proper 0 to 1 type of thing. But maybe,
Right.
who knows?
Maybe. Who knows? I mean, you're in it right now, so you just never can tell.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was going to ask though, because again, like, I mean, Father's Factory, you went to Revio. I was speaking to Roger. I got an email from Roger at oki.com, and I was like, Roger Norton, what are the chances of having 2 Roger Nortons? And I Googled and I was like, whoa, this guy's left Father's Factory to OKI as a CPO. And I'm just curious, like, is that like, I don't know, coincidence? I mean, like, yeah, I remember I mentioned, like, should he be thinking about securing an ops ops move as well? So, like, I'm just curious, like, is there a way where that is indeed? Because I mean, a lot of VCs and like accelerators do interface with a lot of startups. Is that a trend that we should be seeing more of, and just trying to get more people to move as such? Yeah, just close on your thoughts on that, because now it's two for two from FFA.
Yeah. I mean, I spoke to Roger quite a lot when he was thinking about that decision. I think if you're a certain type of person, so look, Roger had done a lot of his own kind of businesses before. Zui is another example. He was the head of engineering at Founders Factory, and now he's in their build program doing risk blocks. So there's a few examples. I think if you're the kind of person who likes to see your work through, you are going to get tired of being in an advisory sort of capacity because you don't get to execute on your own advice. It's not appropriate for you to step in, right? So I think after a certain amount of time, people who like to have that real hands-on experience and actually execute against their ideas and strategies, they will probably find a business that they can work in, or find a way to, a middle ground where they are a fractional CPO, CFO, CMO, whatever it is, and in a number of companies. So yeah, I don't think everyone who joins an accelerator will end up in startup, but if you're that kind of person, you will only be able to bear it for so long before you need to go in and get into something again.
Got it. Awesome. Again, gonna pause. We're almost getting to the end of the conversation. Any questions from folks? Feel free to use the chat or raise your hand.
I think we had a question in the application. I don't know if we have that ready, but when people were signing up, somebody sent a question. So maybe I'll defer to Pelumi.
Yeah, I think I've incorporated one of two of those already, but yeah, if not, yeah, Pelumi, feel free to give us a shout. But yeah, any other questions? Live questions? Comment questions? All right then. So I guess that's the last question for me is how can the whole community, like again, we have a community of operators, founders and the likes. You building now Revio. You've gotten there and you've seen that the lads were kind of like giving you screensaver. You've moved in house and you've seen the real deal. And so I'm curious as to what how can we help? Anything comes to mind as how the community can help Revio, help you in your journey as an operator?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a fantastic community. And as I said earlier, I think the most value I've gotten from any investor on our cap table has been from our angels, because they really care. It's their own money. They've often had the experience themselves. So yeah, the local context and connections, you've got a really diverse community here. We're building a Pan-African business. And so that's definitely something I would want to tap into, really understanding the nuances of different markets, but also just, speaking to founders who are going through the same journey, or operators going through the same journey. It can feel very lonely, very isolating in your social circles. People don't always understand. They think you're insane. Why did you make this change to earn less money and work 3 times as hard? So yeah, I think just being around people who can have those kind of conversations with you, you realize the problems that you have are not unique. Everyone's going through a different version of the same thing and problem solving together. That's probably where I would see the most value from a community like this one.
Yeah, awesome. Well, you're always a honorary member of HoaQ, as do all our AMA folks. So again, please feel free to always reach out to us. We've got a Slack channel. We're happy to welcome you to join us on there as well.
Thank you.
So, and we have like channels called like portfolio updates, community asks, where people can just talk. And it's crazy, like the weirdest request, and I see the community rallied. I think two examples that come to mind. There's the Road Safety Authority in Nigeria, and a founder was trying to get across to someone there, and we put it in the channel, and like someone was like, "Oh, my brother is married to the chief FIRSC, or my brother works in the department of like." So I was like, wow, like in this community, you had like three to five people who had some degree of separation to what was being asked for. I know somebody wanted to publish an app on the App Store. I was like, does anybody know anybody at Apple? I was like, oh, this is not going to fly. And somebody was like, oh yeah, I'm currently interning at Apple right now. I could calculate it for you. So you just never know how, again, a community of people could really help move the needle. So yeah, please feel free to always reach out and if we can help with anything. Perhaps if you just spend a few minutes talking about us review and what you guys do, just so people have a little of context and see where they might be able to also plug in value as well.
Yeah, sure. I also see there's some questions in the chat. Do you want me to field those?
Yeah. We can touch on those afterwards. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So yeah, what we're building at Revio is essentially a platform and API that reduces the complexity, cost, and risk of payment operations across Africa. We work with great partners like Paystack to aggregate different locally optimized payment methods across African markets, and then help businesses streamline the typical challenges they have when collecting and making payments. So that includes things like, how do I optimize my checkout to increase conversion through localizing how that is presented to different customers in different countries for different use cases? It's about increasing transaction success rates, which is a huge pain point, particularly in African markets, through using transactional data and automated business processes like real-time transaction routing, smart retry schedules, and then real-time engagements with customers on channels like WhatsApp, SMS, email, to get them either back into the checkout journey or to collect in arrears. Where we're starting to build out now is some, what we've seen working particularly with large enterprise businesses is they really struggle with reconciling different payment methods, especially when they've been used to one kind of pricing model or settlement model. So expanding into that part of the value chain and how they manage that settlement essentially to wherever the money needs to go. So yeah, I think businesses like, Paystack and some of the gateways we've seen other African markets have done amazing work on payment acceptance and really going deep there. And our business couldn't exist without that. But where we're looking is laterally across the value chain. How do we make it easy for merchants to collect revenue from customers where they want to operate and never miss a payment, essentially?
Yeah. Awesome. I mean, it's a growing, as the world becomes more global in nature, where you can't dictate where your customers come from, and it's the weirdest of things. Somebody built an app in Indonesia and it's just seeing a spike of adoption in Ghana, and you're like, what's going on? But you have no way to then again, like I said, accept and because you just don't even know what's going. Yeah, so being able to have a partner like this that just takes you where you need to like get value from, I think that's really key. So yeah, the questions in the chat. So I think one is just trying to get you back to put on your investor hat. So what would you consider the most important for startups when raising money from VCs? Speed, execution, vision, or strategy? Thoughts?
Yeah, different investors value different things, unfortunately. And, the more intel you can get from a community like this one or founders who've engaged with different investors, the better, because you can, spin the way or the information you highlight to better meet that. I think the best investors actually care about how much does your execution match what you tell them your strategy is. So is the way you're executing aligned to the customers you say you're going after? Is it aligned to the way you're talking about your product strategy? And if that is incoherent, that is a really big red flag for an investor. So I would say that combination of strategy and execution is actually what they're looking for.
Awesome. Yep, that's a good one. And then second question, I haven't been a bit on the VC side. Why become an operator instead of a founder? I think we spoke a little bit about this. But yeah, good to hear your thoughts. And then what advice would you give your younger self to become an operator earlier? So if we were to make transition earlier, what would you have said to your younger self? And then how should someone completely new begin their operator journey? And then what qualities should founder look out when choosing an operator to work with? So pretty much like I'm asking like, what did Ryan see in you to say let's make this happen?
Sure. So four questions in one with 2 minutes to go. I'm not sure I'll get to all of them. Hopefully there've been some threads throughout the conversation that answer all of these. As I said, like I didn't have one particular idea that I was like, this is what I want to build. But when I met Rowan, I thought his idea was really, really interesting and I could see a lot of value that I could bring. And that's why he does consider me and call me his co-founder, because I've been instrumental in what Revio is today, even though I wasn't there from day one and wasn't a part of that idea. So it's sometimes hard to distinguish, I suppose. But yeah, the classic founder, I suppose, is the one that has the idea, but founders come in different shapes and sizes. I think there are different ways to do this, right? I've certainly seen the value in having had 5 years of work experience before coming into a startup, because one of the big pieces of value add I bring to the team is enterprise sales and the ability to work and partner with some of the largest brands on the continent. And I wouldn't be able to do that if I hadn't had my consulting experience and the corporate development experience I had at FFA. And so being able to leverage those skill sets in an environment where people really need you to be able to run with things, you don't have a lot of time to manage or give oversight, that can be incredibly valuable. And so I'm not sure I would have been as valuable of a contributor if I'd done this when I was slightly younger, but maybe my role would have just looked different. I wouldn't have come in as COO. I would have maybe come in as a, product manager or a chief of staff and worked my way up, So there's many different ways that could play out.
Yeah, I think that answers the other questions as well. So again, having something to offer to the founder, you had the experience, you had knowledge, you had things that will make him call you a co-founder. So I think that answers the last question as well. Well, that brings us to the end of our conversation for our October AMA. I hope this was at least useful to folks listening in. But thank you so much, Nicole. It was great having this conversation. Wish you the very best on the journey you're on, and please always remember that you have a community of folks cheering for you and very happy to help as well with things. But you have a great rest of your evening, night, afternoon, morning, wherever you are. But yeah, cheers.
Thanks so much, Nubi. It was great to be here.
Take care.
Cheers. Bye.